What's up, Make Pop Music? It's Austin Hull from Austin Hull Audio and Visual and Make Pop Music, and I'm bringing you another quick tutorial today. So in today's tutorial, we are going to be going over how to kind of spice up your percussions and your drums. So I get this question a lot, and it's people that just have really stale and kind of boring drum tracks where they'll have their kick and their snare and maybe like a hi-hat, maybe like one extra kind of percussion element. But it's just lacking a bit of depth, it's lacking a bit of kind of punch, it's just lacking some life. So I do have kind of a couple different tips and tricks that we're gonna go over in this video. One of those is gonna be just kind of layering these ambient percussion sounds to just kind of fit under your main snare. Another one is gonna be like adding reverb and delay, and then another one is gonna be kind of like saturating things to make sure that they are just kind of, you know, standing their own in the mix. And we're gonna be looking at Douglas's song, I to You, which I did produce, mix, and master. So we're gonna hop in, and then I wanna go over and just kind of show you what I did for the drum track at first. So just like the bare minimum kick, snare, and just kind of rhythm element that adds some movement. And then I'm going to show you what I added to kind of spice that up, fill the space in, and then really just add like my own personal signature stamp on the actual percussion production. So without further ado, let's just hop into the session. Okay, so now that we're actually in the Cubase session, let's go ahead and just take a listen to what we have. I'm just gonna go over the verse percussion because it's obvious that when the chorus comes, you need to stack more than the verses, right? But to do this tip of stacking and stacking really well so it's not cluttered, let's actually use the verse because it's a bit more spacious and it would be easy to really screw up with doing too much. So I prefer to go over this. Let's just take a listen to what we have.
You in and now you are right out. I keep telling myself I can't trust a soul. I can tell.
Okay, so as you can see, there are several different percussion layers happening. We have this little O that's being sung, and that's just from one of our old sample packs, and then I just kind of printed it with a delay. We've got a riser coming up. Then we've got one of the cashmere sweeps that's super cool. If you don't have the cashmere pack, we have one that's called Sellers in ours that's super close, almost identical actually to the cashmere sweep. So you could easily use that. We use Sellers over here as well. And then for the kick, we've just got, and then for the snare, we've got this, and I'll take the delay and the reverb off. Then I added some delay, and I just did a 16th dotted, and then just some reverb, so now we've got. So now we're getting a little bit of stereo width from that snare with the reverb, and then also having that delay. We did a similar thing with the snap. But we just did 1/8, we didn't do a dotted or anything like that. So we've got the snare, the snap, then we've got this little rim hit that we used Camel Crusher on and then filtered out. Here's it originally. Then we've got the second rim hit that kind of alternates with that. That I didn't do anything because that's just how the sample actually comes. Then we've got this like drowned out hit that I got from Splice. Here we go. Then we've got this percussion loop that's also from Splice that I just added H delay and auto pan on. So here's it with nothing. So 1/8 dotted at 90 BPM, and then we just added some auto pan to kind of give it some separation. So this is everything that's in here. What I wanted to do is I kind of wanted to show you everything because most people, even me when I was a beginner, would probably just have this kick and this snare, right? So let's go ahead and mute everything but the kick and the snare, and let's go ahead and even take off this stuff. And let's hear how just kind of bland and boring and generic the verse sounds.
Alone, yeah, let you in and now you are right out. I keep telling myself I can't trust a soul. I can tell you don't want.
So that's boring. So the next thing I did was I added this little O because this is kind of my thing. I've done this in a lot of my productions. I use this exact same sample. It's kind of like an unofficial tag or whatever, but we have.
I'm left all alone. Yeah, let you.
Then we added this sweep and impact.
I'm left all alone. Yeah, let you in and now you are right.
Then I was like, we need a riser to kind of introduce this idea that this kind of phrase is coming in. So we had this.
Don't tell me you don't know, 'cause now you're
So now it's getting a little better, right? The next thing that I added was this little percussion loop to kind of just give us some movement. So now we've got that percussion loop coming in. So since the song's kind of a slower tempo, I think we're at like 90 BPM and it's very, very vibey. Lots of pads, lots of like really, really ambient synths. I wanted something that had a little bit of like consistent movement, and that's what this percussion loop is really doing. It's just kind of accenting the, you know, we're kind of getting a little bit of like a tempo back, and it's not just so down tempo, airy, spacious, you know, super, super atmospheric. We're kind of getting a little bit of urgency with that percussion loop. So that was a big help. That's probably the last thing that most kind of beginners would add, because it kind of is everything that you should need, right? It's your kick, your snare, some kind of like loop, like a percussion loop or a hi-hat, or some kind of like hand percussion or something like that. And then you've even got like your rises and your hits, right? However, to take my drums to the next level, what I'll normally do is I'll kind of layer things in, and I layered a snap in on every single snare hit, just to kind of add a little bit of vibe, right? So here's the snap layered in.
Yeah, let you in and now you want right out. I keep telling myself I can't trust a soul. I can.
So adding that snap in just gave us a little bit of width because the snaps are pretty wide. And then it also just gave us like a little bit of like sharp attack. It sat really, really nicely with a snare. Let me kind of solo these out together so you can hear. And especially since we have this delay on the snap, it kind of adds like this cool rhythmic element in the back. So it kind of goes along with this percussion loop. Kind of check this out. So now with that percussion loop and this delayed snap, we're adding a lot of movement. And then I was just like, the snare's kind of dry, but I don't want to add too much reverb, because when you start adding a lot of reverb to snares, they can get really corny and just kind of So I added this rim hit on the back side of this. So let me just kind of do this so you'll hear. And then I was like, I kind of want something similar on the second hit, but I don't want to do the same percussion, because when you repeat things too much, it just gets really stale and boring. So I'll normally swap out like snaps, or I'll swap out snare hits, swap out like the percussion or like a roomy hit or something every other one. That way it's just creating a little bit of sense of difference between the hit on the 2 and the 4. So, you know, we've got 1. And what we could even do is we could kind of create that like a sense of urgency by shortening up this and almost gating it, and that way it'll stop at the end of the phrase. So you've got something like this. So you could always do something like that too. And then the last thing that I wanted to add was this little drowned hit, just to add a nice little bit of like lowness, because we're getting a lot of high end, even though we filtered out the rim hit. It's still super saturated, and you're still getting like a lot of that like kind of brightness and saturation, and you're getting a lot of those harmonics. So then we just added this little hit that I found from one of the splice packs that I have, and it adds a nice little bit of kind of like ambience to the snare, so you'll hear it. And I only put it on the snare hit in each specific kind of repetition, right? So it's only coming on the first out of 4. And then when the next ones come in, that kind of comes in. So that's pretty much it for kind of layering this verse. Instead of just going kick and snare and maybe some kind of like movement loop like the percussion or the hi-hats, I really felt like adding these filtered rim hits and that filtered kind of snare roomy hit added a lot. And then when we go to the chorus, we've got a lot more to work with now. So then in the chorus, we kind of have the same stuff going on. Then we just added this little hi-hat. Then we just have the sellers. Then we just have the clap impact. And then one thing I did to kind of thicken this up was I added this little stomp up here. And why I added that stomp was to add some kind of roominess to the low end, since we are still in such a vibey kind of ambient song. When we add that stomp into the chorus, it's really creating kind of a wider transient for us to A, get a little bit more punch, and B, just get a little bit more kind of vibe in that drum. So we add that stomp almost as a room sound, but just if you throw a room on a super filtered out kick, it just normally sounds like shit. So that's why I wanted some kind of stomp with like some higher end element where it just sits in really nicely with everything. So now in the chorus, we've got a stomp, all those original kind of layers we talked about. Then we've got this hi-hat loop, and then I actually threw in a hey shout on the back end just to kind of add some. So I like to use the vocal shots as kind of percussion elements because I feel like they add this cool tonal element of being a vocal. But when you place them kind of on the grid and you have them kind of adding to the bounce and to the rhythm, I feel like they can add a lot. So we have the hey, then we have the O, then we have the hey. And sometimes I'll put in even like another little kind of vocal to add something. But I really think the...
Tell me when it's over, I'm so sick of feeling when I ask you. Tell me what was out of you, what?
And I mean, that's really it for percussion. We didn't do too much through the rest of the song, but I just kind of wanted to highlight what a difference adding those little rim hits on the back and those little filtered out roomy snare drums and even layering the kick into the chorus can really do for the dynamics of a drum track. Because if you have only the bare minimum, it can be really stale, it can be really boring, and it can feel kind of just generic and corny because it could just sound like you dragged a drum loop on. So don't be afraid to start adding in extra filtered hits. You could easily too just like make your own little snare hit. Let's just do this real quick for anybody who might not have a ton of samples. Like let's just say you do have that one snare hit, right? So what you could do is you could easily kind of process this. So now you would have something like this. Like you could do something like Camel Crusher. You could do something like Verb Suite. I'm not even going to punch in any settings because it doesn't take much to get these really roomy ambient snares. And then you could just filter it out. And let's hear what we've got. Let's do something like the dark. Let's check this. And then you could even go in and you could like drag it up or down.
I'm left all alone. Yeah.
So you can easily go and you can kind of make these elements yourself. Like I said, just use some reverb, some saturation, some filtering, maybe even use like some modulation if you want to get super crazy and like add chorusing or widening and stuff like that. Just don't be afraid to add those like super ambient elements in the background. They don't have to be super upfront, but they will add a nice little bit of tail to your drums. Just so, unless you're going for the super dry drum sound, it'll add just to get this kind of nice little tail for everything to sink in, and it'll kind of fill out your track. Because like I didn't want to keep adding too many synths and pads because it was getting kind of cluttered in the synths and stuff like that. But when I just kind of used these drums to fill in that extra little bit of space, it was a nice space filler that didn't really add any kind of like tonal elements or melodic elements to the song. So definitely don't be afraid to spice up your drums. So as you can see, you don't really have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to do anything insanely crazy. All it really takes is just having a percussion track that you think has the potential. You know, you have your basic rhythm, you have your groove, you have your kick and your snare. Then you just need to find things that will fill it in, whether it be ambient hits or little accent hits here and there or extra little percussion elements. Don't be too afraid to actually dive in and make sure that the percussion track kind of stands on its own, because I think that a lot of the time in tracks, especially like this that are more, you know, kind of ambient and vibey, you don't want to thicken them too much up with like the synths and the sound designs, because then it just gets really cluttered and kind of messy. So take a little bit of time to really make sure that your percussion track is adding something to the song instead of just like sitting in the background and kind of adding the rhythm and the beat. You want it to actually have elements that are exciting your listener and that are just super new for the song. So use these kind of tips and tricks. And if you want to see more about drum and percussion production in general, just go to our website, www.makepopmusic.com. We do have a drum production kind of course. It's like 2 hours, and we talk about these kind of techniques and then a lot more in that, where we just talk about like how to build your drum track, how to spice your drum track up, doing drum ear candy, how to layer samples, how to mix samples. Everything like that is actually in that full series, so I really suggest that. It's a really good one. It was one of the first ones we ever did because people always ask about my percussion. So that was one of the first things that I wanted to kind of show. But if you have any questions or suggestions, definitely leave them a comment below. Make sure that you leave us a like, comment, and subscribe to our channel because we do have videos coming twice a week. And we have a super special announcement coming Thursday that I am really excited about. So stay tuned for that video. But that's going to be it for this video, and I will see you guys next time. So for now, much love. Peace out, Make Pop Music.
Lost, like everything falls apart. Oh, just tell me when it's over.